So I'm live from Leon, Nicaragua. So that is also what is very cool about the coffee you're drinking. It's coming straight from the source, which means that you have in your hand in the estate medium, all of the estates, whether it's whatever roast it is, you have a pure specialty grade Caturra and Bourbon varietals from 2 farms. Same farmer, well, really just 2 parts of a farm, not actually 2 farms, on the side of a lake in a region of Nicaragua called Jinotega, which is really along a beautiful lake called Lake Apanas. And so that is the classic taste of Nicaraguan specialty coffee. Nicaraguan coffees, especially from the Jinotega, Matagalpa region, are known for a chocolatiness with a pop of citrus. And in the medium roast, you get a bit more, you get a really nice balance. The breakfast roast would be a lighter where you would get more of the acid and citrus. And then a medium, you get, I expect you will kind of get them both, especially if you take in the smell. And so does anybody have any coffee near them to smell? Because really the taste
smells in the bag.
Starts in the nose. It's very challenging. Poor people that have been having smelling challenges with COVID, it's really difficult to taste if you're unable to smell. And so you'd really want to start there. So if we were doing a cupping of coffee, which would be how you evaluate coffee internationally between buyers and sellers and evaluate qualities, you would first, before anything, you'd look at the beans, it'd be raw. You'd look at the seeds and then you'd roast them and then you'd start smelling. And so there's a whole evaluation just on smell before you get there. But so in the medium, between different roasts, it's just a few seconds. It's really amazing how little time it takes to go from a very different flavor of a light to what we call the breakfast roast, from the medium to the dark. Any questions so far?
And
Nope.
Lindsay, the Silky, anybody?
Just in general.
I didn't know it was only a few seconds. Like just that little of amount of time could be the difference between a light roast and a dark roast. Like that's fascinating.
Oh yeah, and we use a very artisanal roaster. We roast by ear, and which yields a great outcome. But you also sometimes accidentally have to send dark or medium when you meant to have breakfast. So you know, I mean, we don't actually, you know, we've gotten pretty good at it, but it's not. I know a lot. We talk about roasting a lot, and just as a reminder, and because the model is so different. I mean, we're here at the source, so we think about the roasting because it's obviously important. You need the coffee to be roasted before you're drinking it. But by the time we've got it to the roasting stage, we've done so much work and really worried about the quality so much that we know what we have in our hands, and then we're just roasting it to the level, which is a very different concept than coffee roasted in the US, because in the US, the roasters haven't done that work. They've just kind of gone and ordered their coffee online from a broker. And so then a lot of talk about is the roast. And so people ask us a lot, oh, what roaster, you know, exact. And we're like, well, actually it's, I mean, you know, people roast all the way just from in their oven to $40,000, $50,000 machines. But the reality is, a wise person told me one time, it's, if you're working with quality coffee, just don't screw it up, is what they said. And I'll never forget it. That was when we first got started, and it really helped us pull through, like see through a lot of the smoke and mirrors about coffee and what we needed to focus on. So yeah, the breakfast. And so the thing is with roast is that there's not been great information about what the actual coffees are. So a lot of focus has been on roast, and it's very emotional. So, you know, there are dark roast people that love it, and medium roast people that would just like they have memes, they have t-shirts, like I'm a dark roast. And so we don't have any of I don't have a preference about how you enjoy your coffee, because what we do, I was just talking to Roberto, who's the farmer for Elefante and a good friend, is I was doing a little video and I was asking why do you want to sell your coffee to us here in Nicaragua? Why is it important to you? And he said, because we work so hard to make high quality that then it just goes and gets mixed up. When we export it, it just gets mixed, and then you don't get the quality. So for me, a dark roast specialty coffee is also great. So don't feel pressured. If you like your roast a certain way, just drink high quality and then buy whatever roast you like. You will volley. You know, it's kind of like if you're drinking a really nice Merlot or Cabernet, like it's okay to have preferences. Just it's when you're drinking the trash is when it starts to really mess with your stomach. And so anyhow, what do y'all think? Enjoying your coffee?
That's fascinating. I'm glad that the focus is kind of on the bean and the grower and, you know, the actual type of bean we're drinking, as opposed to necessarily how it's roasted. Because, and like as you try coffee, is like in our house we generally drink the Cuban, but I love like mixing it up every once in a while just with a medium roast, because it's mix it up and remind myself that Twin Engine I actually have all of your coffees behind me.
Oh, nice. Yes.
Because I legitimately, the only one that's not out there is the breakfast, because there's one bag left and it's at the pop-up. So every edition that they currently have right now, Anne, is here in my house right now in Egan. So it's nice just to mix up and remember that there's so many flavors and so many characteristics within the collection that, yeah, don't get focused on one. Keep mixing it up. That's why I'm kind of.
I mean, we'd like to, ideally, we would like, I mean, the USA, we are the largest consumer of coffee in the world. And it's a lot. But I mean, it's 14% of the world's production, which may sound like a small number until you imagine how many countries there are in the world, right? That drink coffee. It's a lot. And it's a lot of power. It's a lot of, I mean, when the US consumer decides something, boom, like it's a massive amount of coffee. But the thing is that as far as kind of generally what's being said about the beans is kind of where we were in the 1980s with wine. So it's just like red wine in a jug, you know, it was kind of changing. And so coffee, where we would really like is that we start to appreciate it like that, because with that appreciation, you start to be able to incentivize higher quality production, which gives us something really delicious in our cup, but as importantly, it conserves mountain ecosystems that are being degraded because the consumer, not just the US consumer, but the mover, it was saying, well, actually, we don't really know, so it's okay if you produce cheaper coffees and mix them. And so what that does is you eventually, well, we're seeing it in all of Central America, that the farms that are, I mean, just beautiful. I mean, all the photos, you know, the mountains, jungles, you know, inclines like this. A lot of them were forested in coffee after a really long deforestation in the early 1900s. And when we don't demand quality, they start to be left again for cows and deforestation. And so you lose this very rich ecosystem. It's just not understood very well because no one is normally talking to the producers. You get messages kind of filtered through the media, but the more, as opposed to grapes, I don't know if anybody's a wine lover out there, as opposed to grapes, grapes can be grown. I mean, obviously they have their own terroir, but in high altitude coffee mountains, I mean, you're in these ecosystems that are very difficult to get to. The roads are very difficult. So you really have to be dedicated. And then on top of that, to produce it under a certification like certified organic. It's very challenging. So the more we know. But so what do you think about the medium? Anybody out there drinking the estate medium?
Brendan, I don't know what you would say too, but
Anne is ready for the Cuban. She
Right.
already has her smoking jacket on, so she's ready for
the cigar.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
I was just gonna say that this is so enlightening to me because I really as of recently thought I was a dark roast person, and what I have realized is that it was just that I was buying nicer coffee, getting nicer coffee. So one of my favorites right now is a medium roast, and it like really bothered me. I was like, I thought I was a dark roast person. But that what you're saying now makes a lot more sense to me. And I'm even starting, and maybe Andrea, you speak a little bit to this, starting to understand that I prefer different coffees from different parts of the world and that they taste different to me. Can you speak a little bit to how, is that just the beans are different, or how is that different?
Well, I'm gonna continue to do a touch point to wine because it's the closest thing that I know that most people in the US have some, knowledge, awareness, and, growing, because microbreweries, I would touch there, but it's totally different. It's a very different thing. So yes, so you have, before we even talk about quality, we need to talk about country, region. So now you're like really thinking about wine. So you wouldn't just say, hey, I like red French wine. I mean, some people would, but most people wouldn't say that today. I like red California wine. Or if you went to a restaurant and ordered that, it would be really confusing because they wouldn't know what to bring you, right? So basically with coffee today, we're saying, give me a Nicaraguan coffee, which is basically saying, give me a US wine, right? So like what? But that's kind of what you see on the consumer end. So within the countries, if you'd like to, if you'd like to think about these different regions as being as varied as, you could talk about California, Oregon, you could talk about France. I mean, you're talking lots of variations. So on top of that, then you have different varietals of Arabica coffee, like not even talking about Robusta coffee, which is a whole other interesting story, a big player in the world. So you're talking about Robusta coffee. So this is Coffea Arabica. That was the plant we're talking that's been around for thousands of years, not the hybrid Robusta that was created to grow in like low altitude environments. I mean, the coffee, like how coffee got to Central America, it was smuggled. There's lots of great historical stories. But the point is so you have different varietals. And really until like the last 10 years, farmers, it was some of the varietals, like Nicaragua was a very poor country. So what's interesting is that we have non-GMO varietals because people are just poor and couldn't afford technology. So they were still farming, or I just said the word farming because I think in the US you think of like row crop farming. When I say farm, it's a jungle. Like it's literally a jungle with trees growing on the side of the mountain. And so these varietals were all just grown together and not being differentiated because the market wasn't saying they wanted to know the difference between a Merlot and a Cabernet. They were just like, yeah, we want coffee, cheaper the better. And so you have these different varietals. So like the Elefante, and then you add like versus the estate, you're drinking a Caturra Bourbon, and then this Elefante is a Maragogipe, R5 is a Catuai. So you're really able to start digging deep into the varietals, and then curing styles. We'll hold that for a minute later. But so we haven't even talked about quality. So you have all those variables. So you have countries. I mean, we're all in a similar latitude, the coffee producing regions, but very different in terms of the dirt, which has a big dirt, the trees, the shade trees, everything that's going back into the soils and creating. If you look on the side of your box, you'll see the ecosystem of the trees. Like those are literally the trees growing. So it's in Spanish and English, but it's the type of that create a shade system, a 3-level shade system in the mountain. And okay, so now let's talk about quality. What is this? So if I had any agriculture people out there, I'm an ag economist, by the way, agricultural economist. So that's where I came from here.
My mom's a farmer's daughter.
Okay, great.
We're farm kids too. We're farm kids too.
Yay! So this is so easy, so easy.
Farmer master gardener.
About yellow corn, right? So you'd have moldy corn. You'd have all these different qualities of corn. I mean, now there's in the U.S. it's quite homogenous, but back in the day, you would have different corn coming out, and so you'd get paid different prices. So what you have variation in corn quality is in coffee probably times 20, because you can lose quality all the way. You know, you have a bird that picks on a fruit, and so then there's a hole in the fruit, and then that means that the seed it gets a black spot on it, and all these things affect taste. You can get over fermentation, you get mold from the water. So all the practices, I mean, just nature, but everything about how you Spanglish, how you manage the trees throughout the year. It takes about 3 years to get a fruit-bearing tree for the first time. Coffee fruit, so it's a fruit-bearing tree, which most people don't think of it like that. They call it a bean, which is just confusing. It's not a bean, it's a fruit, like a grape. And a much hardier tree. It's like a proper tree. And so now you're talking about quality, and this is where it's gotten really exciting for people like us and you, and in the next years, is that when there's signals like what you're doing right now, and say, hey, we want to taste the differences and we want to know about the quality, it starts to send signals to the market that says, start to pull it out and have better management. So the quality wise, what you've been getting for years, and I mean, if you go and pay $8 for a bag of coffee, you are not getting a specialty grade quality. And that means that there's a mixture of mold, like not mold in the sense like you're going to die mold, like in the sense of just, it's going to taste like, all these things are called defects, and they're not hurting you per se, but I mean, it's actually, nobody knows because nobody's doing any research about it, but it does hurt your stomach. I mean, it's pretty verified that when you're drinking all of these types of defects, it just has this funky taste. So if you've got like overly like grassy taste or bitter, that's not the country, that's the quality. So this is the tricky part about coffee in the US, is that if you were to read a bag of coffee, nothing tells you whether it's a commercial grade, a specialty grade. You have to know that if you're like it's a specialty grade. I mean, we would be the cheapest, like by market standards. We are offering the best value specialty grade on the market. Like Intelligentsia would be the same coffee for like $20 a bag, because you have to pay a lot more because of the quality is higher. So to get back to your original question, a medium roast, a light roast shows all the defects. So when you're cupping and evaluating coffee, it's at a much lighter roast than even our breakfast roast, and you can see, taste everything. So historically, dark roasts were there to cover up all the stuff, to just kind of give it a burnt taste. And then people got used to it, and that's what they think coffee tastes like. But that's changing rapidly. So that's why this conversation is really hard, because it takes a lot of time. How do we educate people on Instagram about coffee quality? And then what tools do you give a person to be able to go into the market? When I go, because I haven't been to the US, well, since like February, but when I go to the grocery store and I look at the bags, like the words say premium, gourmet, the best. Okay, like, so what is that? I could show you a whole bag, a whole set of defect coffee, and then I could roasted, and I could show you the beautiful most beautiful beans, and roasted, they look the same. It's in the taste. So that's why it's tricky. And more and more, you have to really know who you're getting your coffee from. I mean, if you're interested in knowing the difference. So that's the challenge. If you were going to drink our estate and you were going to go get a commercial coffee and try to compare them, you're comparing apples and oranges. Like, you're not comparing the same country, you're not comparing the same varieties, and you're definitely not comparing the same quality. So that's kind of where it is. And I don't have an easy answer for you. We made a commitment to work with specialty grade coffee because that's where we decided, I mean, other than like moving ourselves to Nicaragua and creating jobs and blah, 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 but we said, we're going to work with this quality. We're going to tell producers that we work with, we are not adulterate. We're not trying to blend it for a lower price. We're going to work with it and then see what we can do, and trust that the U.S. coffee lover, as they know more, they will choose differently. And they taste. I mean, we've converted, I hate to say on Zoom, like other names of companies. I'm always scared I'm going to get sued or something. I don't know.
You won't sue you.
But,
I definitely won't sue you.
No, it's like, it's one of those sensitive things. I'm also like, my objectivity as an economist, I really like, that is important to me. But it's a choice. If you can only afford $5 a pound and you need coffee, there's no judgment. It's just an important thing to know that there is no way you're getting a high quality in that objective sense. You're getting defects in your stomach, and we don't really know what those do. And you would never eat it. Like, if you saw it with your eyes, you would never choose that. It's like here, people buy beans in the market, and the first thing they do is they go home and clean them like we used to do. Or like if you're shucking corn on the cob, there's a worm, like you're going to tear it up. You're not eating that. But that is what's happening in coffee. And this is like, it's just getting roasted and it gets sold. There's one of the farmers we worked with so long. I mean, the conversation about farmers to me, we're just all friends, and we're in the community and we're trying to do this together. And so one day I was really like the economist trying to understand like how coffee works. And it was one day Dios, and he said, Andrea, I'll say in English, he's like, there is a customer for every coffee. Like, and that means that, from prisons to, the most expensive coffee, like it's all getting sold. It's just how it's coming into your cup. But I didn't ramble too much. But quality is one of those things that I just don't think we can talk enough about, because there's so little understanding and so much to learn. And the more we know, the more we can tell producers and coffee companies we want it. And so that's not even talking about impact. So that's literally just about the quality of the seed, AKA bean. Colin, my husband and partner, is like, Andrea, just let it go. Just let people call it a bean and just let it go. But for me, it's so hard because it just feels like it's part of the confusion. Like calling a coffee cherry, the coffee fruit a cherry. Just anyhow, I digress. So dark roast.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, what's your question?
I just brought to mind when the question was asked about how the coffees differ from country to country taste, reminded me of something I learned when I was a master gardener, and maybe these Minnesotans would identify it with, was the Honeycrisp apple. How you taste the Minnesota Honeycrisp apple, and it was originally developed, and that's what it tastes like. But if you taste a Honeycrisp from Washington State or Michigan State or Chile, they taste different.
That is a perfect example.
And that's because of the growing conditions in those different countries, different states, and the soil conditions. So it kind of reminded me of what you pointed out too. So maybe that would be something they could identify with. And
it is though. Is the Honeycrisp originally developed in Minnesota?
Yeah, yes. It was at the U of M.
Yes.
The Arboretum.
Yes.
Our Arboretum out in Chanhassen
developed it.
A lot of apples are actually cultivated here in Minnesota.
I didn't know that. Do you want me to tell you an apple story about my father-in-law?
Sure.
So on the international side of apples, not to just go off. Sorry, Emily, you have to like rein me in if you want to try another coffee, just like rein me in and say.
Okay, tell your apple story because I love hearing your stories, and then we'll talk about the cigar. We'll go on to the cigar blend.
Yeah. Well,
or
the thing
honey bear. We have honey bear
outside of the United States, outside of like North America, places where people grow apple, where countries grow apples, they are a gift. I mean, all of Asia, Central America. I mean, this is what you give at Christmas time because they're, like $1 to $2 a piece for like nothing like the apples. I mean, like they're grown like really small. Not nice. But it's about like being beautiful. But it's like a show of wealth, which is just it's so interesting. So my father-in-law, Mick Ganley, from
yesterday, he's a big teddy bear.
From East, Jesus, we say Northeast Minneapolis.
Yep, North.
Retired police sergeant. Anyhow, he has to have an apple and crackers like every night at 10 o'clock. And I believe it's a gala apple. And so the thing is, it's like I went to the grocery trying to prepare for him and I get all these apples. He did not eat one of them because he's like so polite about it. But I was like, why is your dad not eating the apples? Like, well, they're not the right kind. And so it was, and I was just like, so I like, okay, I still have these 10 or at the time, and this was a couple years ago, but it was so funny because it was about this, like, no, the preference was very specific. And so yeah, apples are a great example. Onto the cigar number one.
Okay, so actually we're also doing honey bear. Do you want to talk about honey bear since it's also a medium?
Yeah, so honey bear, so then we're going to get into the curing styles. So Ethiopia, coffees in Central America for most of the culture, always, until actually from Nicaragua was the first fruit cured coffee coming out of here is when we did honey bear. So they would be washed, which means that you physically depulp the fruit and then it goes for about 24 hours into this huge, tank. It's like a concrete vat in the farm, and you don't use the environment because of the heat and the bacteria in the environment does a natural fermentation, and so that eats the fruit away, and it takes about 24 hours. It's very artisanal in the sense it's not like there's a bunch of machines out there. It's just people that have been doing it for years. So Ethiopia in Africa, I worked in sub-Saharan Africa for many years in development, but so a lot of the method there is just to take the fruit out and go throw it, like just go dry it by the road or in the fields in the fruit, all the qualities together. So that was kind of this Ethiopian, and it gives a very different flavor, a profile flavor, notes, whatever you want to call it. And so people would think that was that coffee, but the reality is on top of the Honeycrisp, the different varietals, you've got these drying styles. And so if it's dried in the fruit, it gives a natural sweetness. It gives a very different, it's complexity. It gives a lot of body is one of the big deals. And so in Central America, they'd never done this. And so some farmers, again, as farmers started gaining independence and being able to process their own coffee, it's another conversation, but it's a very important part of how we're able to do what we're doing. And so they start being able to be innovative and get excited again. And so, Juan de Dios was the first. He's like, well, so I'm doing this. What do you think? You want to give it a shot? And so he was taking the skin off and letting it dry inside the fruit. And it's a lot more labor intensive. Because all the coffees are hand turned in the field with this wooden rake and raked and then turned every 12 hours, like dried under the sun. Nicaragua is a very natural, one of the upsides of being quite poor is there's still a lot of things happening quite naturally. And so you have to turn it, and then the quality, you just have to manage it a lot more because you can't really see what's going inside because the outside is blackening. And they call it, so in Spanish, honey is miel. So it's this meloso, it looks like honeyed, it's called honeyed coffee, but it's not honey at all. It's the fruit. And so then you basically mill it just like you would a wheat, because there's this parchment, and as it dries, the seed shrinks, and then you get the outer, and then you open it. And so then all that time period, the sugars have been, combining, melting into the seed, and there's no calories. It's just that it gives a different profile. And one of the big parts is that it gives a body to it, and then a slight sweetness, which can also handle different levels of roasting. And so the honey bear is just a slight touch over medium. It's not a true medium, even though the sticker says medium. We don't have like a medium plus sticker, but we roast it. We offer it in one roast because that's where we think that it should be. It's a reserve coffee, so it's more expensive to make. And then it was the first coming out of Nicaragua. So you still, after the seeds are dried, you still go through all of the sorting to get quality. So it's sorted. Man, by the time it gets to you, at least 12 times, including a hand sorting of specialty coffees, commercial grade coffees. They go through sorting, but not to that level. So that's our honey bear. And so Colin's from Minnesota. I'm from Southeast Missouri, and he was the animal. He's the man behind the animals. The original honey bear he drew, and I think it was a human likeness. It was him with a coffee. He's still kind of sad that I changed it. I went for a more, I don't know, recognizable honey bear.
Maybe at year 10, you'll have to do like a throwback to his.
Yeah, I mean, it's not off the, yeah, it's still in conversation. But yeah, so that's the honey bear, and it's been one of our best sellers forever. And in general, I would say, like, the concept of new, we're also having to finding it. I mean, neither one of us were, we're economists. We didn't see ourselves as being like marketing people. We weren't like retail sales. We just had this mission. We knew about quality. We wanted to make delicious things. But we were finding there's also this idea in consumer expectations, like something new. What do you have new? And so if you go to Lafite in France, you don't say, like, which new wine do you say? You start to ask about the vintage. And so we're trying, I mean, we will hopefully be doing a better job of it. And, as we gain momentum more and more, of trying to get people to understand that every harvest is new. So every year is different. And so it's in harvest right now. So harvest is starting in December, which is, it's beautiful because it's red and green. And then it will go through February in the very highest areas until March, because it takes longer to mature the fruits. But it's every year it's different. We don't put a vintage because we're in the middle of trying to get acceptance, but then also create this beautiful product. So the more people understand that you are getting a new coffee. So we don't carry harvest over. So what you're drinking is that current year's harvest, and then we will move to the next year. It's just, as a small company, like we can't create packaging for everything. But so if you ever think about that, this like new, and you also have to remember what you're asking is, like I said, it takes 3 years. You have the lifespan of 7 to 10 years. And so new is relative. We can't just call up the coffee Santa and be like, hey, I want a new version. I can make new tea towels and new colors, but new coffees are so there's already quite a line of exciting coffees. So just as you're thinking about that, as you go through life making your coffee decisions.
That's a great thought, like, because I'm loving the comparison to wine and apples, like, because that's definitely something that I know in Minnesota I connect with. As a former wine drinker, I can connect with it. So should we talk about Cigar next?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so Cigar. I just want to make it very clear, don't be intimidated by the name. There is a beautiful story behind it, which Andrea will kind of explain how it gets its name. But I don't like that social media won't allow me to have the product listed because of its tobacco connection, its connotation. So it's a little bit, Andrea and I kind of just talked about the stigma around cigars a couple days ago. So Andrea, tell us about Colin and his cigar roast.
Yeah, so we're in Nicaragua because of a premium cigar connection. So Colin, when he studied in England, at Oxford, in London and then Oxford, and while he was there, the dollar was like 2 to 1 to the pound, or well, so $2, 1 pound, very expensive. And so I started learning about cigars as a way to kind of pass time in the pubs and while I was in school. And it's a very different culture there. It would have been Cuban cigars historically. But at any rate, the premium cigar kind of world has a very, very, very long history. I mean, tobacco is native to the Americas, a very beautiful history that has been corrupted a bit by other things. But where it's still, so anyhow, so he was writing about cigars. He was traveling all over Central America and the Caribbean, learning. And meanwhile, we moved to Italy, and lots of things are happening at the same time. But he's becoming a professional taster. And in journalism, we owned a cigar magazine called Cigar Journal, which was the largest European cigar magazine. We were part owners in that. And so a very academic approach to cigars of the same kind of comparison, the same way you would compare wines, cigars, rums. Not that you can't compare non-alcoholic things, but it's just what lends itself to, because of different characteristics, because of ages and blending and region and types and all of those different things. So cigar number one was one of our flagships, actually. It was one of our first coffees. The Estate and cigar number one, we call them flagships. They were the very beginning. And so when we moved to Nicaragua, Nicaragua is buying now, it's one of the top 2 production countries for premium cigars. And so by that, it's like whole leaf, tobacco's rolled. This is not cut, it's not cigarettes, it's not any of the cheap stuff. So what we noticed is that people were paying like $10, for example, for a really beautiful cigar, but they were drinking really low quality coffee. And so when we first started Twin Engine Coffee, we were going to market to the cigar community. Well, we learned a lot, and there was other demand, but so we created a coffee that would have a really big body and bold and be a good pairing coffee, but also a clean finish, because you don't, I mean, the best thing to pair with coffee is to cigars is sparkling water if you want to evaluate cigars. But if we're now talking about a pairing, like the way you would pair chocolate and wines or wine and food. So coffee and cigars is being paired. It's just not being paired with a very high quality coffee. So if you're smoking something and then got this astringent bitter coffee in your palate, well, I mean, what's the point? So that's where the cigar number one was. We have plenty of people who don't ever have a cigar who enjoy it, but it was specifically for that pairing, but also nostalgia. I mean, almost no one knows that premium cigars have basically lifted a whole part of Nicaragua out of poverty, created a middle class in the north. It's a very beautiful culture. We've done a lot of work in Cuba. So just where you can see it, it's very community. And that's actually where the cigar culture here is from Cuba, because of 1959. And, but it was really kind of an ode to that. I mean, what's also interesting is that it's almost all females rolling the cigars. So you have, supporting whole families, whole middle class in some of the poorest countries in the world. Nicaragua is the second poorest country in Central America, and the Americas, really just second to Haiti. And so for us, it was like an obvious thing. I mean, the craft is similar. I mean, it's very labor intense. Everything about it, you're picking leaves from different parts of the plants from all over the world. I mean, Connecticut is still one of the premier wrapper growers, which is the outer part of the premium cigar. And so it's just really a beautiful craft that, because of politics in the US is not really known, but it's very different than any other kind of smoking thing that you might smoke in the US, but pure also. So the pure quality is a huge issue in premium cigars. And so anyhow, it's a pairing coffee, and we made 2 roasts. We do medium and dark for the same reasons. People have very specific preferences still about roast, and also to be part of the culture of trying to get people to try, of saying, not that saying you're a dark person, that there's nothing wrong with that, but also saying, like, you know what, sometimes I like a medium roast with this thing, and sometimes I like a dark roast with that thing. And what we also don't know is that in the morning time, our palates are very fresh. So you would, if you were a professional coffee taster, cupper, you would never cup coffee in the afternoon. So that's when you would drink maybe your darker roast or at dinner, because, you know, if you were in Italy, just an espresso after dinner, but it's because your palate is very tired at that point. So it doesn't do you a lot of good to have a super fine wine when your palate's really tired, or the brightest coffee. So kind of thinking about that, like those pairing ideas. So that's really where cigar number 1 is. And yeah, so we love it. And it also has the Jaguar on it. So it's one of my very favorite boxes. All of our boxes, we looked around and we worked with farmers to really look at all the fauna that is in Nicaragua. We made our packaging like, what can we do differently? Because, you know, everybody's got to, you know, design and beautiful, and it's easy to do that in the US now, but we wanted to, what could we bring that others can't bring? And so we could really bring what's really happening in the coffee world. And so so all the animals you see on the side of the boxes are actual animals that are found here in Nicaragua. And there's we all of the text is original from us about what's the text on the Jaguar, Emily?
The text on the Jaguar says, hunts by the river near our Sabaco coffee drying patios.
And then it's in Spanish.
Yes, and then it's in Spanish. This box is a little,
oh, you can't see it.
A little scratched.
Yep, yeah. So Sabaco is where all the coffee comes down to dry from Jinotega and Matagalpa, and there would be cats down there. I mean, there's not a ton of jaguars, but anyhow, it's one of my favorites.
I love that. Okay, before we run out of time, let's talk about the tea quickly. You kind of touched on it in relation to the honey bear. And then I want you to tell everybody a little bit about 5 before we go.
Okay. So Caturra tea, well, it's like our 4th name to try to figure out how to communicate coffee fruit to the US. But it is the same fruit that was wrapped around the seeds from your estate. So the estate is the same farm. And basically, I mean, whatever buzzword you want to use, I don't really think about it like that, but now like upcycling is buzzy. But there's the coffee wood, and then also the fruit often gets thrown out because it's just depulped. So same farmer of Honey Bear was like, hey, he's very innovative. He's an agronomist. He's great. I want to try this. What do you think? I'm like, all right, Juan. Let's go for it. I have to get to figure out how to sell yet another thing that I'm not great at selling. But so we pulled out the ripe fruits, and then they are sun dried, and it's awesome. I mean, if you like black tea with any kind of citrus notes, it's delicious. More and more studies are coming out that there's a special polyphenol in coffee fruits that aids brain function that they're not able to find in other high antioxidant fruits. So there's tons of health benefits that are starting to come out, but I personally just think it's delicious, and I like to drink it hot and cold. I'm a Southern Mid-South girl. I like to put a cinnamon stick in it. You can't mess it up. It is not like black tea, like it's bitter, so you can just keep putting water until there's no more flavor, and then just throw it out, compost it, but they're literally the coffee fruits. So they're the sun-dried coffee fruit that the 2 seeds were taken out, and then the fruits were sun-dried. And the U.S. the US is only really known about this. I mean, I think the average person doesn't even necessarily know that there's a tree with a fruit. And again, nothing wrong with that. It's just, we're learning. And so I think maybe 4 years, it got named cascara, which makes no sense to me because that's just Spanish for peel. So we're it's on the box because there's you're gonna fight them, you're gonna join them, what are you gonna do? But it's called Caturra tea because Caturra is the varietal. So we're trying to stay true to what is true. So that is the coffee plant. That is from the Caturra coffee plant, which has fruits and seeds, and the seeds go into the estate, and the fruit is going there. And we call it natural focus because it's the pure fruit. We hope to do some other combinations with ginger and hibiscus and other things in the future, but that's where we are. So that's the fruit. Enjoy it. Don't be scared of it. You can't mess it up. Just put some water in it and cinnamon if you like. The cinnamon makes the sweetness pop. So it has 0 calories, which is really interesting. It tastes sweet, no calories. So if you have any kind of sugar issues. So on to the 5.
I'm so excited for the 5. So I have the limited edition box. These are at my pop-up in Vasiliki. These are in Northeast Minneapolis. Just because I
love the last one. I mean, there's no more. So they sold out. We were amazed, humbled, so happy. Well, the real story behind the 5 is that we're not turning 5 actually. We've been around since 2013. And this is another thing. Colin's like, Andrea, you just have to let it go. But a lot of things happened. There was a major crisis here. That we've had some things that you just, if there's ever, what is it, an insurance? Spanish, but
like an insurance claim?
No, when all the things that happened that you could have never imagined. Yeah. And so this year, of course, it was COVID, and we were like, you know what, we are going to celebrate 5 years. We had this beautiful art, and we have made this Catuai coffee. And so anyhow, the Catuai, so it's a yellow Catuai, which is a different variety of Arabica coffee. And the cool thing about it, I mean, it's delicious, but it when it matures, it's yellow. It's not red, which I don't know. It's just really cool. And so, which normally, a fruit goes from green and passes kind of through a semi-yellow stage, and then it goes to red when the coffee fruit matures. And so this stays, it matures to a really bright yellow. It's delicious. And so we chose it for an anniversary coffee. And so we were celebrating it with calling it the 5. And so so we made some boxes, and we handmade them all here, printed them, and they sold out very fast. But we've made available the bags in 5, which are a limited edition box. Also one of my favorites. We put the puma on it, which is amazing. We don't ever get to see it very often. But the puma is very tall, and as tall as a coffee plant. So that's the 5, and they're all in a medium roast. You can't, unfortunately, we made these beautiful reflective boxes that you can only see in person. but that's the 5.
The little cards and the stories.
Can you read it to us, Emily? Can you read us the card?
Yes. I don't want to take the one off of this. Okay. Written by you, ma'am. Did you write it in?
And Colin.
Says, a lot can happen in 5 years. Twin Engine Coffee was founded. Nicaragua suffered civil unrest, and now we have all of the challenges of 2020. When the dream to offer Nicaragua's best coffees and create jobs for the talented people who live where the coffee grows, our course was set. Despite external challenges, Twin Engine Coffee has thrived. To thank you and to celebrate, we have released this limited edition coffee called 5. 5 is from a special farm. It's famous for placing nationally in the Cup of Excellence competition.
So there you
That's a
go.
little-
That's the 5, and Emily has it there. We also have it for wholesale, available for retailers. We have some still in whole bean. Well, I think a little bit in brown too. But we have it. There's a number of things that we just haven't been able to get out there because it's been special times here. We survived 2 hurricanes back to back, and but we're getting out there. We've got our tea towels, lots of cool stuff to come. But yeah, I'm just so happy that we've had this time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you still have.
Anne, anything else you want to know?
This is like just the tip of the iceberg. You've got me hooked. Now I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's so much.
I'm busy.
Well,
Yeah.
and Andrea, as you can tell, is a fabulous educator. She teaches me something new every day. How much have I learned from you today alone? So, stick with us. Like, follow Andrea. Andrea manages the Twin Engine Coffee Instagram. I manage the She Is Love Instagram. A lot of what she posts, I'll reshare, and vice versa.
We're and if you have suggestions, I mean, one of our biggest challenges is breaking down the things we've been talking about into digestible segments. And I'm not, I'll be 41 in a couple days. I grew up on a farm. I'm not like social media person. I've been trying to get it off my plate just because there's so many things to do. But that's the challenge, is that a lot of times we'll talk, and then people will come back, oh, well, okay, so how is this different than whatever coffee in Delaware or something? And so then, we're just trying to figure it out. And, I'm trying to understand the idea that it takes 6-7 times. I studied for many years. And so if you have any suggestions, I mean, we're really in this, not that, it's not like we don't have any interest, but we're just kind of like this big family, and we want coffee lovers to have better coffee. You work hard for your dollars too, and we want you to be able to buy things that you know what you're getting. And I mean, because at the end of the day, Colin and I both are educators, and transparency in that sense of like really understanding what you're getting, what you're paying for, and not just kind of smoke and mirrors of marketing. And so we're open to any feedback as you follow along, and thanks in the meantime. We really appreciate it, because we cannot do this without you all. We just, like, that's just the way it is. We can make all the beautiful coffee we want to and have all the great things happening in Nicaragua. And, if coffee lovers don't buy the coffee, that's just the way it is. But you are. So we're really appreciative.
Yeah. Vasiliki, Lindsay, any questions?
I also got a question. You were talking about sorting earlier. What does that mean? Like when they're sorting the coffee?
Sure. Well, it starts all the way at the beginning. So coffee farms are managed differently. So a higher quality, like if you're going to get a higher percentage of high quality coffee, it's coming from a producer that is like managing. There's also just like commercial coffee being grown, kind of it all being put together with less sorting. But I'm going to talk about the highest quality. So it means that when pickers are picking, they're picking just the most mature fruit. And then you'd kind of come from a second picking. I grew up with cotton, so I'm always thinking about how you have to go through second pickings. But so you're picking first, and so you're sorting red fruits out, you're sorting damaged fruits out. And so they're pulped, the different fruits are pulped separately. So things start being separated very early on. And so they're fermented separately, so in separate lots. So you just have like a few lots at that point. But then after the fermentation has happened, so the coffee's wet, and then it goes into water. This is washed coffee. That's the easiest to talk about. That's the majority of coffee. So then it starts to float. So now you're starting to sort within lots. So now you have multiple lots, and within the lot, you're going to sort for floating. And so your lightest coffees, your dense, higher quality coffees are going to sink, and your lightest coffees are going to float. So those are coming off. So now you're starting to get like a lot of different lots of coffee. And so you're looking for the densest, most perfect coffee. So then those go to the patios to be dried. And so then once they're dried, now you still can't see the seed because it's in different layers of parchment, shell, depends on what you're calling it. So then it goes and it rests, and then you pull it out and you start to mill the coffee. So now you can actually see the seed, the bean, which is, the shell is gold, the inside is more of a green hue. And so then you can see other imperfections. So then it's going through a visual, which more and more people are, they're using a laser machine to go for color. So any kind of imperfection in the seed, that's being sorted. And then it's being sorted again through a physical weight again. So now with the seed without any shell, it's in a manual machine that's shaking like this. And as it shakes, the heavier beans go down like because of weight. So now you have all of these physical attributes sorted out. I mean, lots of lots, many different lots of coffee. So then you haven't even tasted it. So now here's the thing. You can have 2 lots that are beautiful, dense. One has been over fermented, one has not. You can't tell anything. Every single lot of coffee is cupped. Samples are taken and roasted. And so then that selection, so they're graded. So you can do all the physical selection you want, and 2 very exactly the same can taste completely different. And so now we're talking the difference between a 68-point coffee and an 83-point coffee. And so a takeaway is that specialty grade coffee has to be 80 points and above. And so that takes into account, you already leveled the playing field with the physical. Now we're talking about taste. So now we're talking about all those beautiful seeds. Now we'd cup them. And so we're evaluating across characteristics of 6 characteristics: body, sweetness, acidity. And that's when you start to move up into that, like, oh, this is interesting. And I care about how I roast it and prepare it. And but most coffees aren't there. So that's what we're talking about in quality.
Wow.
And so,
now I see what you mean, like 12 different sorts by the time it reaches our cup.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people, I mean, I'm sure somebody other than me, it's just not something, I guess, because I'm living it and I've not broken down as things change. But I mean, if you really wanted to count, you probably get up to 20, because a lot of it ends up being like hand. And then if some, as farmers shift, different things come together, like the electronic machine costs more than $100,000. And so, but people are trying to get those because you can sort a much finer. But then literally the highest coffees will go on a band, like a moving band, and they're physically being sorted. The final defects of the most expensive coffees are being hand sorted at the end. I mean, they're hand sorted along the way, but like a very final sort.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so physical, there's physical defects, and then there's primary defects and secondary defects. And primary defects are heavy, like they affect the taste and what's going on, like fermentation. Secondary defects are like a broken seed, which doesn't affect the taste as much. Really, I mean, maybe not at all, depending on what we're talking about. So specialty coffees have 0 primary defects, and then depending on who you're talking to, which metric, a percentage of secondary defects allowed. And so then what happens in the rest of the world, or most of the world, the coffee world, because it looks very different on this side, the buying and selling side, than it does on the package at the grocery store side, is that so companies would go and they say, okay, my customer is willing to pay this much for coffee. Like Green Mountain, for example, like they would say this much, and they would say, okay, I need to blend the lower quality with some higher qualities so that I get to the price point and profile that's acceptable. So most coffee companies and most companies in the world are looking for the minimal acceptable level of quality for price, right? I mean, and not in an objective way. I'm not saying like, not in a judgmental way, like in a price, they say, okay, they're willing to pay this and they need this taste, and this is what I'll choose. And this roast, etc. But that's, I mean, the market for coffee, it looks so different in what is being specified on this end, with obviously price being really, really important.